Hey everybody, Scout Crafty here again. It's Wednesday. It's the day before Thanksgiving 2020. I have to tell you something. Thanksgiving's going to be rough this year, kind of canceled it on my end because, as you get older, you got to pick and choose your battles, and I have, people older than me that you would have Thanksgiving with, and you got to be careful, If you're in your 20s and stuff, you don't have to worry, but when you get a little bit older, you got to, like I said, you got to decide what you want to do. But it made me think, especially for you younger people out there, when your parents are still alive, we take it for granted when they're around, but when they're gone, you miss them. And around the holidays, you tend to. And I was thinking about past holidays and past Thanksgivings. And remember last video we did that Shoots Away game in the arcade. And I was thinking about the arcades that we used to have. Remember arcades? Oh, I miss them, My dad used to take me every once in a while, especially around my birthday and things like that. He would take me to the arcade. And I used to love games that they also had rides. We had a place here called Adventurers Inn. It was an arcade. And they used to have a lot of private, small arcades splattered around the state. And it was interesting because these small arcades, they would have a few rides and they would have some arcade games, but it was a small place and it was such a good time we used to have. And, the funny thing I remember, I wasn't much for the rides so much, although I did like bumper cars. Remember bumper cars? Whoever thought about that game? That was such a fantastic ride. Everybody would get into these like rolling coffins, and it was so funny because you remember they used to have, I was fascinated by the game. They would have this screening on top of the ceiling that these electrodes would come up from the bumper car and touch and drag across it was almost like a cyclone fence up there, and the sparks would come and there was always somebody there that was oblivious. Do you know what I mean? There was always that one kid that was in the bumper car, and you had to have eyes all around the back of your head in bumper cars, because if you didn't, you would get, sideswiped. Somebody would rear. There was always that bad kid that would be looking to run into somebody that was oblivious, and there was always that oblivious person that would just be looking around, and next thing you know, their neck would be. I don't even know how they even let that game go. Today, you can never do it with the litigious environment we have now. Somebody be suing, and these kids would be brought out in back braces. But bumper cars were really fun. But I think my favorite was the arcade. I used to love to go into the arcade, and this was before a lot of the games were just transitioning. They were still mechanical games, and they were transitioning to the electronic games that we have today. And now everybody has games at home, so arcades are kind of a thing of the past. But do you remember, like the mechanical games I used to love one of them was Seawolf. I used to love that game. Remember that with the submarine? You would look through and the Periscope, and then you would send these little missiles down. And I remember the water. They had a textured fiberglass water that looked so realistic, and the torpedoes would illuminate as they went towards the ship. And then they had a helicopter flying game, which is very much like the home vertibird game that came out years later. But this thing was, the way they designed these games, and they were all, if you ever looked at the back of some of these old arcade games, they were all circuits and solenoids and switches and gears, and it was just amazing. And we weren't easy on them as kids. We would be throwing them around and stuff, so they were built like tanks. And boy, I used to have such a good time with those games. And they had remember the crane? That one goes back to the 50s. There was like a steam shovel. You had to see how much, I guess they were beans or something, you were loading into a chute, and how much you could do in a certain amount of time. Such great skill games. And that's where a lot of us, decided, man, I would love to do this for a living. There was just something a little bit different about the mechanical games compared to the electronic games and don't get me wrong, I'm sure the games today are, the stuff that you can buy on and play at home is unbelievable. I mean, the realism and things like that, but again, it's a whole different experience. The old mechanical games were just something unusual and enjoyable, and I do miss them. I wonder if you have any arcades near you that still have any of these, or arcades kind of over here, they're a thing of the past. They don't have them anymore. They started to get really you know, all electron. Pinball was a big thing years ago, and you don't see that anymore. There was always that one, the change guy. Remember the guy that was was probably an ex-con or something. There was always a shady looking guy with that change thing around, you know, giving change. Okay, today I picked kind of an ambitious project because I only have a day to get this done, and it's just that I went upstairs and I was looking around. I said, you know, I've been looking at this hatchet for a while. I found it interesting. Let's take a look at it. Okay, here's a hatchet, and again, we went through this before. The difference between an axe, a hatchet, and I always called a hatchet anything that had a hammer head on an axe, you know. So anyway, it's a handheld tool that had a hammer on one side, an axe on the other. As interesting as I always found these to be, I never used them. And like I said, because I always felt uncomfortable with this blade coming at your head as you're trying to hammer something. So, but I just like them. I always did. We always had one. A lot of these we used years ago. We used to have a coal furnace, and they would use, this would always be in the coal bin to chop up kindling to start your coal fire. Anyway, you can see here, this is a beautiful example of one, and it's a stamped Craftsman. The head was probably made by Vaughan, but this handle is an aftermarket handle. You can see what it says here, Hartwell vacuum cup. These were great. And it's got these, you've seen these before, these countersunk holes here to give you grip. I love them. I always like them, and you know, really nicely done. And you can see the handle, the straight grain on that. Look at that grain compared to the way that the orientation of the grain is just perfect. It's just a good handle. It's a little bit loose. Now, here's the thing. I don't know if this was done. Vaughan didn't usually do this type from the factory. So there's two wedges put in there. And you can see there's a little bit of a hole. It's just a little slippery, but you know, we can always tighten that up mechanically. You know, we'll do it with a wedge. And you can see the condition that's in. You know, it's in good shape. The edge isn't beat up really, and it's nice, but it's stained. It's got the carbon staining, that rust. The head's in decent shape here. You can see there's no chips out of the edge. It's just a nice shape. It's just something that I would like to do up nice. So let's get started with this, see what we can do. Okay, here we are at our post-wire brush evaluation, and you can see we don't do the whole thing with a wire brush because we're going to hit it with the sanding pad, and you know, obviously you have to get to the sanding pad to get this stuff out, so there's no sense in going with the wire brush. The only time we do that is if there's rust and we want to see what's under it. There's no real rust, it's staining here. But look at the beautiful facets that were done on this casting. It is just, this forging rather, just beautiful, huh? Except over here we have one that's got a little bit of it looks almost like there was a rust there at one time. You see that? So we're going to have to fix that, but I mean, look at that. That's just beautiful, beautiful design on here, and the head is in. Vaughan did some beautiful stuff, and the face. So we'll get to that now. A lot of times these hatchets were designed for camping, things like that. It's an all-purpose hatchet, and you're wondering what this little notch is there for. That's a nail puller, and a lot of times you go camping, you would hammer a nail into a tree or something and hang a hammock or a tarp or something. You would leave a little bit out, and that's where these would come in handy. It give you a surprising amount of leverage to lift that nail out of whatever you're doing. You can see here it works very well, and but again, it's not good for digging a nail if the nail is set into the board. You would have no way of digging that out like that. But it is meant for, if a nail is up a little bit, it pulls it out very easy. So first we're going to address these wedges. Now you can see here, this is they put two steel wedges. That's not the way it's done. This is done obviously after mold, whatever the case may be. But what we want to do is we're going to have to pry these wedges out of here, replace it with a wood wedge, and then one metal wedge can go perpendicular just to lock that wood wedge in. But we're going to take a screwdriver here. This isn't the way I have a screwdriver made just for jobs that, you know, would normally damage. But we're going to wedge it in here and try and wedge that steel wedge out by pushing this in and digging that out. We were able to dig it up a little bit. Now, if ever there was a tool that was meant for this, it is the good vice grip that saved me so many times. I'm going to try and pull this out, wiggle it out with the vice grip. Okay, well, we got to this second wedge. Took at least a half an hour to get out because this thing is splined. You know, has those that hold it in there, and it was tough to get out. But we got it out. You see, we didn't mangle the top. It's that a wood wedge will fill that nicely the way it should have been done. So we'll do that. But one thing I have to say is you will eventually have casualties when you're doing it. And I broke the tip off. I reground this years ago. I'll have to regrind it again. It's a Craftsman. Now, you know, there were people that would have said, and I'll tell you, my family, if you broke a tool because of, you know, you were misusing, like I was, this screwdriver, you know, using it as a pry bar and it broke, we wouldn't bring it back to see us because, you know, it didn't fail because of it was not made well. It failed because I was using it wrong. So I'll regrind this, make it another shorter screwdriver. And the tip, I mangled this a little bit, but that's okay. I'll regrind that. And, you know, that's sometimes you get casualties with tools when you're using them to get a job done. So let's start working on that.
Now, one thing I always do with all my hammer or axe handles, at the bottom of the cut, I always drill a hole so that it will not split down the handle. That little hole will prevent any extra splitting.
Okay, now to get all this deep staining out, what you have to do is you have to go below it. So here you can see we used a coarse belt. The coarse belt will leave a little bit of, you know, scratches in there. That's to be expected, but you'll get them out later on. But now we're below the staining. Now this part here, 1 inch back from the blade, will be tempered much harder than this part. So you'll see that, you know, you don't make as much progress with the flap disc as you do up here. You know, you say, oh, I'm doing good, and then all of a sudden you get down here and it's like, what am I, got a dull flap disc? It's not. It's because it's tempered harder. So you just be careful down here. You don't want to mess up the profile, but you do want to make it nice and smooth to get rid of as many of the deep scratches as you can, and then we'll get rid of these scratches later.
Now, the whole reason I bought this hatchet was because of this beautiful handle. And I don't know if you've ever seen these before. I know I have. This is a handle. It was from the Hartwell handle manufacturing company. And this is called the vacuum cup handle. And Hartwell brothers were out of Memphis, Tennessee. They manufactured baseball bats and handles for hammers and hatchets.
And they were known for these vacuum grip handles. You can see we sanded down. Everything's nice. But that was an aftermarket handle. And the head probably is a Vaughan head. But this is definitely an F. That's why the handle was put on wrong with 2 wedges side by side instead of a wood wedge. So we're going to stain this now and finish up. We're a long time into this project.
Now you know my favorite part. Remember what this Craftsman hatchet looked like before we started?
And we're calling this project done. Boy, I'll tell you, I had to really rush to get this finished. The paint is still not 100% dry, but let's take a look at what we did here. Stained the handle, obviously. Filled in the cups with a little Scout Crafter red. Put 1 coat of shellac on here. Redid the face, the head, the sides. You know, satined it out so it's not, don't show the fingerprints, but it still has a legitimate shine to it for a hatchet. And look at this, is what I'm most proud of. Okay, look at the top here. Let me show you. Okay, this wedge here, it's poplar. I made a custom wedge and I put it in. It's 1 wedge that goes from here to here. It is so tight, I used a dake to press it in, that there's no necessity for a steel wedge. Sometimes you have a little gap here or here and you put that steel wedge in, it expands it, and there's absolutely no gap. It's just, as I coated it with linseed oil, just beautiful. And you know, did a little Scout Crafter red along here. These beautiful facets on this one, isn't there? I mean, they're so pronounced. And I just, you know, did red around here. I just love this hatchet. It's just such a nice tool, and I think this one might go into the Scout Crafted Junior toolbox. Okay, it's 2:30 a.m. on Wednesday morning, the day that I will post this video. Hopefully I got to go upstairs and do a lot of editing, download it. It's going to be a late one. Anyway, thanks very much for tuning in. I hope you really have a great Thanksgiving. We have so much to be thankful for. I hope you enjoy it. Take care now. Bye-bye.